Welcome, everyone. I am Ron McFarland, and it is my pleasure to be your EMC for our Braver Angels event tonight. It's called Helping Loved Ones Divided by Politics Real People, Real Conversations. Politics is tough. It always has been. American politics is competitive, thrilling, frustrating, and irritating. The stakes are high. Issues are important. Outcomes matter. This is why we care at Braver Angels and should care about our beloved American politics. But the question is, do our politics have to be polarizing and not civil? You've heard Judd Catchwell singing his song, The Great Divide. People journey into this divide by sharing their stories and becoming vulnerable. They are our teachers and our real heroes. Remember, we are here in Braver Angels fashion to listen, have dialogue, and not try to change minds, but build a house united as a community. Just give you some reminders. This is not the normal Braver Angels on a Zoom. Our program uses it tonight is going to use the webinar format, which means that only the participants would normally talk about politics and then learn some new communication techniques from Braver Angels co-founder Bill Doherty, a professor and director of Marriage and Family Therapy Center at the University of Minnesota. Bill will be drawing upon his decades of experience as the couples, Susie and Rick, as a therapist. Our program, our program tonight is, again, just a reminder, will be different. So, now please welcome our moderator and participants to this teachable event, Dr. Bill Doherty, Susie, and Rick.
All right, thank you, Ron. That was a lovely, warm opening. And there go Susie and Rick on the screen with me. And I see Ron with his sugar bear is still there. So okay, well, I guess it's just us. A sugar bear felt nice though, a nice one. So welcome to this little Braver Angels event. Rick and Susie, as I was looking at who was logging on or who was saying who they were and where they're from, this is sort of a Braver Angels family tonight. Okay, so because you were gracious enough to let us to go first for here, so we just have our kind of close family members kind of cheering us along. So grateful to them and to Ron and mostly to you two. So let's just maybe start out with a little bit about you guys. So you and I talked a little bit before, and you've been married for over 20 years. How long have you guys been married?
Coming on 26.
Coming on 26. Okay, and I know you have 3 sons who are kind of growing up and launching. Some launched, and one about to launch, or
Yeah, we hope.
Maybe.
We're praying.
oh.
Never know for sure. Sometimes they're bugs,
Yeah. And
So yeah,
when we
this
talk-
went to college this last, this was our empty nester year.
Okay. Hey, and you picked you didn't pick the empty nest year, but it came along at the time of COVID.
Yeah.
Oh boy, yeah. And I understand that you have kind of a family that's mathematical and musical both. You told me that?
Yeah, so we have 3. So I'm a retired math teacher, and you.
I was a math major in college, and I've worked in the software business ever since.
And we have 3 boys that are all very engineering and computer sciencey, but all 3 musicians as well.
Okay. All right.
Which they get from their mother.
Okay. So you're musical as well then.
Yeah.
Susie. Yeah,
I tried to be.
yeah, yeah. And you guys live in Colorado, beautiful state of Colorado.
Yes, so we're
Okay.
very blessed to
Yeah,
have this
yeah.
beautiful outdoors.
So you volunteered to be part of this conversation. And so let's just start out with hearing from each of you about why you decided to come here today and try out this conversation.
Well, to be clear, I was volunteered
Okay.
by Susie, so no,
Okay,
just kidding.
no, I think that he would agree that particularly the last 4 or 5 years have been more challenging than not. And it's been just creating more and more tension within our marriage that it's, and I've almost, I think that it's, a lot of it is the politics, but also my engagement with the news and current events. And, and then when I try to engage with Rick in discussion, we're coming from such different vantage points and perspectives that it just becomes almost easier to avoid conversations.
Yeah.
And so I think this last year with my last kid going off to college, it kind of really illuminated the need. And I was very, very happy to stumble into Braver Angels and know that there are solutions of learning how to communicate better. And so each time I've been exposed to Braver Angels, it's been a positive experience. And I figured, like, if, in with our country, I feel like if we can't figure this out in a marriage where we love each other, I don't know how our country's going to figure it out. So that's kind of
okay.
I'm coming
Yeah.
from.
So Rick, in addition to being volunteered, you're here. So
Yes.
say why you thought this might be worth trying.
Oh yeah, I think that Susie's definitely summarized it well. I think we've had a tough time communicating over current events, news, all of that kind of thing. It just triggers ugly exchanges. And Susie's very proactive about anything in the marriage that isn't working right. So she's keeps us on track. And so she came across this, and right away I could see a difference in her, how she was talking to me after one single Braver Angels event. I was like, where'd you go? So yeah, I think anything that allows us. I think I also had explained to you, Bill, that one of the other things is she really loves this stuff, even though she will sometimes not admit it. And I think, and I don't really like politics. I don't like talking about it. And so that's the other thing. She finds it very intellectually stimulating, and I don't. And so, but marriage is a compromise. So I got to find a way to engage it the right way and the right, level with her on this topic.
Yeah. So before 4 or 5 years ago, I'm hearing that you guys did somewhat better with this. It wasn't as much of a barrier before, or not.
I mean, there are always some trigger
Okay.
discussions that, so, I mean, I think the last 4 years were, magnified in a way that I never could even imagine. And I think, I feel like because I am a news junkie, it is really been helpful in our marriage. And this is a terrible thing to say, but with Trump not in the news, that has been like, because I do think that was a trigger point for me.
Okay.
And I'll admit that. But I know that there are things that I view as current events that I'd like to discuss. And he's viewing that as politics. And so that to me is a disconnect in itself, because I'm kind of like, this is newsworthy. And he says it's all politicized. So I don't know how to.
You get into the struggle at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't even know how to engage in a discussion that isn't about the Colorado Avalanche or, like those are safe discussions. And that seems to me, I would rather dive in deeper and have a more interesting conversation.
So part of the dynamic is that you, Susie, bring issues to the fore. And I'm gathering from what you said a minute ago, you may be, as we call them, more on the blue side, more of the
Yeah.
Democrat side, and
Yes.
Rick more on the red Republican side. Okay, so you, Susie, follow politics. It's interesting to you. You feel passionate about things, and so you bring conversations to Rick.
Yes.
And then Rick, it sounds like there's partly you're saying you're not that interested in politics, so you just as soon not engage. But I'm guessing the other part is that you differ on the content of the substance of these things.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. And then how does it go then when you? So you bring it up, Susie, and then how do you often respond when she says, "Hey, what about January 6th, or what about the Voting Rights Act or something like that?" Then what how do you respond?
Well, so we did a workshop a few weeks ago with the family thing. So I'm a classic defender. So
Okay.
So she says something, I defend, right?
Okay. Okay.
In fact, we had an argument whether I was a sniper or a defender, but I'm definitely a defender.
Okay.
So
Okay.
so
So
that's
for-
how it goes.
Okay, so for the
jumps in.
audience, that's the Families and Politics workshop. We talk about the
Yeah, sorry.
gladiator, the defender, the sniper.
Right.
So you initiate, Susie, with some enthusiasm.
Yeah.
What are you hoping for when, Susie, when you initiate these conversations? What are you hoping for?
A conversation.
Okay. Okay.
Like I would just like to, and that's another thing. So I have, my kids gone. I
Hmm.
kind of prematurely retired because of COVID out of the classroom.
Okay.
So, my life has been kind of like, the carpet's been,
Mhm.
yanked out from underneath me. And so, it's a big responsibility to have to engage in conversation with your wife at this point. And there are times where like, I feel I can't even have the news on.
Mhm.
Like I'll have my telephone with earbuds so as not to offend
Hmm.
Rick,
Okay.
because so I kind of feel like I have to live an invisible life in
Mm.
my own home
Hmm. Mhm.
so that I don't start any,
Yeah.
like tension. And it's silly. It's like, here I am. Well, see.
That's one way to interpret it.
Yeah, that's her way.
Yeah, that's your
Okay.
interpretation.
Yeah, that's my
You know?
interpretation.
I'll hear from you next, Rick. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So, well, no, hold on. Finish out what you were
Yeah,
saying,
go ahead.
Susie.
Sorry.
Susie, the
Oh.
lockdown of the year, the intensity you're feeling, the eggshells you're feeling.
Yeah, I just feel like it's, I don't like conflict. I'd like to be intellectually engaged in a discussion, but it's not like I'm seeking conflict. And to me, like being able to watch the nightly news to see what's going on shouldn't be so controversial in my own home.
Okay.
Like, that to me doesn't seem like, I feel like it's being interpreted as a sniper move. You know what I mean? Like I'm kind of goading him as opposed to I'm just trying to see what's going on.
Okay. And so, Rick, you were going to say something there. That was her perspective, and you have your own.
Yeah, I mean, I think that from my perspective, that especially when Trump got elected, I feel she was getting more and more into it. Round the clock. At one point, I said, "This is a round the clock thing for you." This is what it felt like, and CNN or MSNBC was on nonstop in our house. And so, yeah, I sort of blew a fuse and like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I don't want to see this anymore. I don't want to talk about him. I don't want to watch another minute of CNN around here. And so,
Can we talk about the here and now? Though?
Hold on.
Yeah.
Let him finish out.
Sorry.
Let him
Go ahead.
finish. Yeah, keep going.
So yeah, so that's what I experienced, right? So yeah, I was basically like, enough already. I just don't want to see it or hear it. All it does is cause tension. So
Okay.
So anyways, I think so that's where we got to, and then there was this truce for a period of time that I don't think she was really bought into. And
Well, be careful. Don't read her mind on that, but
yeah. Well, I know, as I can tell. So,
okay.
all right.
So let's, one of the things we're going to do now, just a clue in the audience, that what we're doing is an introductory conversation, which we've had, and then you've agreed to show us how you talk about a particular hot issue. And so we'll have a little demo, and then we'll move from there to maybe there's some ways that can be helpful to you. Okay. And I realize we probably could have gone on longer with this opening part, but I'd like to actually have you have the conversation. We talked about an event you chose, and that is what's been going on in Israel and Gaza, and you have different views about this, and so. If you could, I think, Susie, you're often the one that may begin the conversation. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And so if you could just have a conversation for a couple, 3 minutes, without trying to be your best here, but just how it might go. Okay. When you're just your regular stuff, knowing you've been, dealing like so many couples with COVID and the lockdown, and this year of so much intensity politically and health-wise and all of that, and your kid leaving home, all of that kind of stuff. Okay, that's the sort of backdrop that we'll talk about. But so just talk with each other now as you might regularly.
Okay. So I have been struggling about, watching what's going on in Israel, and it really breaks my heart to see the escalated violence. And obviously I believe that, Israel has every right to defend herself. And, I'm Jewish, I support Israel, but I also feel that some of the moves that Netanyahu has made have been pretty provocative, and I'm really frustrated with it.
So you don't consider the ultimate provocation, the Palestinians just firing rockets at Israeli cities, trying to kill civilians on purpose? That seems pretty provocative to me.
I'm not suggesting that what they're doing is an acceptable thing, but honestly, I'm looking at, it just seems very coincidental that as soon as the president in Israel suggests that the opposition form a new government, that so timely that Netanyahu decides to, start evicting people and pulling the speakers out of the, so that they can't at the mosque have their celebration of what, and it just seems like there are other ways that Netanyahu could have.
So you think that the answer to that is to start a war and fire rockets?
No, but
that's what happened.
I do believe that what happens is that Netanyahu knows that he gains power and is able to hold on to his power with conflict. And he is a master of division, as is Hamas. Hamas needs Netanyahu, Netanyahu needs Hamas.
But you're blaming Netanyahu for the whole thing, it sounds like. I mean, that's how you started this.
It is absolutely true that there was that is what I believe that was what precipitated all of this most recent one. I'm not suggesting that Hamas is correct, but it's just, it breaks my heart. It hurts to me to realize that there are so many Israelis who are centrists that are like the level of anti-Semitism that's rising as a result of some of these actions, that it just, I don't believe it has to go down this path. I feel like.
So what would you, I just don't understand. Like, how is Israel supposed to, you say you support the right to defend themselves, but then whenever they do,
I don't think that
effectively turn tail and run. Actually, you don't really support them.
No, I do support them. But I also don't support the provocative action of settlements. I don't, I don't. And I feel.
What about the provocative action of like taking a bunch of rockets and storing them, for a rainy day when you can start? I mean, is that not a provocative action?
Okay, that's a good place to stop.
Okay.
Okay, good job, guys. And I really, no, I can see you're in the middle of it, so I appreciate your authenticity here, and not trying to sugarcoat it for us. And so it gives me a good look into, does this sound like how conversations often
No,
go? Okay.
no, because there's one line that he did not use that typically comes out right at the beginning,
Okay,
which actually came out when we originally spoke with you. And that's why I wanted to try to do something different, because
Yeah.
he's,
okay, so,
he uses a word that says, are you so naive to believe?
You're right.
Are you
Okay,
so
so-
naive to think that?
okay, so that wasn't here this time. It was
No.
here when we talked before. And Rick, you're saying that often you
Oh, yeah.
often might say that. Okay.
Yeah, that's my
So-
go-to. That's my
Okay.
go-to move for sure.
Okay, go to move. Okay, so what with the addition of the N word, naive,
Yeah. Yes.
Um,
yes.
then this looked kind of like what happens.
Yeah, this is my, I feel like this
This
is
wasn't
more-
as heated as
No,
normal.
no.
Right. Well, you just have 80
Yeah,
people
I think
watching, so I
we're-
understand that. But
Yeah, that's right.
but the so the intensity lower, but some of the interactions and how you deal with each other pretty similar. I mean,
Yeah,
what
but-
when I
There's another aspect to our fights, which is she won't let me talk. She will interrupt. As soon as I start to have a response, she'll interrupt and talk over me. And that, so the end, the naive word drives her nuts. That's what drives me nuts. And I will ratchet up my intensity
Okay,
hugely when I don't feel like I'm even getting to make my points at all.
okay,
good
So,
point.
okay, good. Well, good for both of you. You recognize that you each have a kind of some sort of little dagger, okay? And interrupting is one which shuts you down, and then you may flare up. And the indication that you're naive about some stuff you care a lot about, that's the trigger for you, and you get more intense. So
And I feel as if there's implications that he'll say that I'm naive, I've been brainwashed.
okay,
I don't, questions, like if my opinions doesn't mirror his opinion, then I clearly don't have the correct information.
okay, that's what
And
you
that
think.
has been told to me over and over and over again.
Okay, okay. So let's talk about, let's back up a bit. And I want to go back to my earlier question, Susie, when you bring up a political topic, what are you hoping for? What are you, you said you're looking for a conversation. That sounds fine. Is there something you're hoping will happen that you'll get back from Rick? It's something from him that you're hoping for.
I mean, ultimately, at some point, of course, I'd want him to agree with me.
All right.
I mean,
well,
let's be
thank
honest.
you. Well,
Like,
yeah, you're
you
being
know,
honest. So
so-
thank you for that. Yeah, because it isn't just, hey, I'd like to talk about events
Yeah.
of the day.
Like, I would love for him to be able to say, I can like that's got to be hard. Like I'm not Jewish, Susie, and I can imagine how frustrating it must be. Like I don't ever, there's
Okay,
nothing like
well,
that.
there's two
I
things
think I
that,
converted last week, by the way. All right.
so there's two things that, well, one is, as I'm hearing you, what you just said now, you'd be looking for some empathy if you have strong feelings about something's upsetting you. And the other is that there's a part of you that wishes he would come around, that maybe you could present enough strong evidence of
Yeah.
arguments about Trump or about the
Yeah.
Israeli-Palestinian thing, that he at some point will see the light.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't be on the wrong side of history. So-
Okay. So that's important. That's where I'm starting there,
Yeah.
because those are two natural human things to wish for. One of them is more potentially obtainable, and that is some empathy. If you're distressed about something, that's more attainable. This guy clearly loves you, and
Right.
the other one, that of this wish, this hope that you could swing him around, maybe not in one conversation, but in enough conversation, turning the ship, which is clearly going in the wrong direction from your
Right.
point of view, right?
Yes.
So I'd like to invite you to consider abandoning that,
Yes.
because it's not likely to happen, number one. And secondly, if Rick is going to change his politics, it's not going to come in conversations with you when he senses you're hoping he will.
Correct.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's hard.
It was interesting is when we got married, because I'm Jewish and he's Catholic, everyone kept thinking, oh, this interfaith marriage, how's it going to work? That has never been an issue. The only thing that's ever been the issue is the politics.
Yeah.
Because the religion piece to me is so personal that we would never expect another, that's a personal relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the politics really I never thought that was going to be where
Yeah. So I'd also like to suggest that politics is pretty personal too. And one of the things we do in some of our Brave Angels workshops, we ask people this question: what life experiences have influenced your approach to politics and public policy? And people have life stories. They have experiences, family experiences, schooling experiences, values they formed. And so since you're able to hold a good boundary, if you will, around religion, which to some people is much harder, right? Because religion can seem like the truth about the world and God and so on.
Right.
You actually, the two of you have had pretty good boundaries there, of mutual acceptance. But in this area of politics, which I'm suggesting is also personal, is value-based.
Right.
It's been somewhat harder for the two of you to hold those boundaries.
That's a fair statement.
Okay. And so my first input for you, Susie, is to consider working internally on accepting that Rick has the views he has. He is who he is, just like he has the Catholic background and views, and that it's actually going to be counterproductive for you and him in your relationship, for you to have a hope that you'll say something, a strong enough argument that would get him to change your mind. And you might, and I'm going to talk more with Rick about this, but you might get more of the other goal, which is personal connection and
right.
support.
That is, that's a goal I would like.
Yeah. And the other one seems like it's worth thinking about anyway, of letting go of your.
Yeah, and I feel like I would like to be respected, that I'm a grown-up who can read different, and watch different news. Like, I feel like that I should not have to be criticized for that.
Yes. And where I'm going to go, and I'm going to go to Rick in a minute, is that it's much easier for you to ask, well, to insist on that, right? And we all deserve respect when you are respecting Rick's different views. In other words, if you're not trying to change him or suggest that his values aren't quite right, you're on firmer ground to ask him to insist, if you will, that he respect you as well.
Got it. Makes sense.
Yeah. And so, Rick, you're not off the hook here, right? We got this. Rick, the defender. So we have Susie, the convincer.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then interrupting you when you're not getting it.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And then you are the defender. And what I saw in your exchange is that Susie would say there's this and there's that issue, and then you never actually said what yours position was. You just sort of went after her. So
Hers.
are you saying that? Or what about this?
Yeah, yeah.
So you had to kind of shield up
Right,
and then deflected stuff that she said back to her.
right.
And in this case, didn't do the naive thing. So you're in this sort of fending her off, but
Mhm.
also kind of getting her back,
Yes, yes.
right?
Yeah, I think
Does that make
that's right.
sense?
It does. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
You're
and
sending
I
to the,
and I have to typically speak quickly, staccato for the most part. So yeah.
oh, you just did a little dig at her there.
I know, I did.
Okay.
That's
So it's
true.
hard
That's
not
what
to
I
do
mean, right
digs.
there.
Right there. Right. Yeah. So I want to encourage you to see yourself as having choices
Mhm,
that you can make in how you communicate
mhm.
with Susie, even if you're feeling annoyed or bothered. So you just as she's got degrees of freedom of how she relates to you, you have degrees of freedom. But it would mean on your end being more visible, less sort of shield and getting her back, less the defender. The thing about the defender is they're not very visible. You don't really know where they're coming from, except that they don't like what the other people are saying.
Gotcha. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And for you, this could come in two forms. One is if you don't want to engage on a topic, to just say, well, we can talk about how you could acknowledge the passion she feels, right? But to also say, right now it's not something I really want to get into in terms of my own views.
Mhm,
That's one. That's visible. It's clear. Okay, it's
mhm.
not sniping back.
Uh-huh.
It may not be what she wants to hear at a particular time, but not everybody's ready at any moment to talk about it. But at least it's clear.
Mhm.
Okay?
Yeah.
Or if you do want to engage,
Mhm,
you can do two things. One is if it's something that Susie has passion for, I mean, she's upset about. A lot of people in the world were upset about what was happening in Israel. It's just all those pictures of those the rockets and the bombs and the kids, and it's pretty bad stuff.
Yeah.
And so if Susie is expressing feelings of the distress,
mhm.
if you wanted to, you could just relate to those feelings.
Yeah.
I can see how it's bothering you, or even just, yeah, it's a terrible situation. In other words, without the content of who you think is right or wrong, you could connect with her around this is just what an awful, tragic thing that's going on. It's a tragic thing that's going on. Now, but you could lead, if you wanted to get into a conversation, you could lead there.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Would that be helpful to you, Susie, if he?
No, that would be helpful. It would.
Yeah. Yeah. So in other words, there's the content of what she's saying, and then there's the feelings behind it.
So just so I understand.
Yeah.
So and to use the argument we were having. So one of the things that I'm sure came out is she really dislikes Benjamin Netanyahu, the politician, blames him for a lot of this, right? That's a lot of her feeling around it.
Yeah.
So are you suggesting that I try to shift the feeling away from that aspect and sort of make it be about this is terrible, a lot of innocent people are dying, and while not touching the electric rail of how she feels about Benjamin Netanyahu, as an example, right?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. You would just respond to whatever she's leading with. Okay.
Yeah.
So if she's leading with what a terrible situation, if she's leading with Netanyahu's at it again, and I'm hoping this new party gets him out of office, maybe something be better.
Yeah.
You could, and I have to ask how you would feel about this, Susie, but if you don't want to get into saying exactly what you think of Netanyahu right now, you could say, I get you that the guy drives you crazy. And you'd like him out of there as soon as possible.
Right.
Okay. With just without necessarily, you can go on to say what you think, but that's what she's saying.
Mhm.
And clearly Susie has feeling about this. This isn't just an intellectual conversation.
Right.
She's Jewish. She
Right.
cares a lot about what's going on, and she sees the leader of the Israeli people as a destructive influence. So this is real, right?
Yeah.
And you could just say, yeah, yeah, he's driving you crazy. I get it. And then if that's what you said and stopped, then Susie, you'd have to be willing and able to accept that without him then giving his own views. Now he
Right.
could, that would be the third part of it. We could talk about how he could do that. But if he did not want to engage
Mhm.
about his views, and he said, I get you, he's driving you crazy, could that be enough for you?
Yeah, I suppose it depends on the situation, right? So like perhaps on that one, probably. It's hard because everything's so fluid. Like, I'm very, frustrated and sad to see how the Senate couldn't agree, on the bipartisan commission.
Right.
Okay. And I haven't brought that up yet at some point, but that is really frustrating for me.
Right.
And I don't know if all I need to hear him say is, yeah, I'm sure that's very frustrating. Like, because,
Yeah. So let me say that's one. There's three ways to be visible in the conversation. One is to say, I'm just not in the mood to go there. I understand, you like to, but without any zingers. The second is to just say, I can see that this is really getting to you and bothering you. And then the third would be to engage in the topic. But what I'm saying, it has to be free. It can't be coerced. Okay, it has to be, you have to be willing to be. That's now obviously if you went the whole rest of your marriage with him just saying, I feel your pain, that's right. But if but the third way would be, Rick, for you to engage. But here I want to offer some tips about how to identify a difference, but not get into an argument if you don't want to. Okay. So this would be the third way to not be the defender, but to be visible. I'm just going to make up how you think about the commission. But let's imagine you thought that was not a good idea to have one. Here's how it would be. Susie, you would say, oh man, this commission, I mean, can you believe those Republicans wouldn't, we had 9/11, we had JFK, and like, they're so self-centered, they won't even do this, blah, blah, blah. And then Rick could say, I get your passion about it. I myself look at it differently. Okay, I don't share your perspective on it, although I get your strong feelings about it. And I think January 6th was a terrible thing. I'm sure everybody hates what happened there. So, connecting around that was an awful thing that happened, and then respectfully differing on what's the next step. And then if you were going to go further, you would go further knowing you have different views on this. And your goal would be to see if you could clarify those views.
Right.
Not
That's
to change,
right. Yeah,
not to change anybody.
right.
Not to say it's naive, or not to say, can't you see this? But to clarify that two people who care about the country, who presumably were upset about what happened that day, have a different view about the best approach to finding out what happened. And that you would clarify, not fight. And what that would be based on is neither of you is trying to change the other's mind. It could happen if you clarify things, but you would then be respecting each other's boundaries, your own autonomy. You're not zinging, you're not trying to overwhelm him, and you're not just being the defender.
Right. That makes sense.
So hard to implement, but this is sort of what this is about, is each of you trying to change your own role in this dynamic.
Mhm.
And yours is then, Susie, letting go of expectations that you're going to convince him,
Right.
and then respecting, not interrupting him and so on, and then hoping for maybe some personal connection or whatever, but letting go
Right.
of that. And Rick, it would be for you. I'm saying to show up more here as her husband, as a partner, somebody cares about her, by being clear about where you are. That sometimes you just don't want to engage it at all. But other times it's like, I get you. It bothers you. I understand that you're upset by that, and then sometimes, and that may be all, and sometimes to say, to announce you have a different view, and see if you guys want to talk about your different views.
Right. So can we, I think those are all really helpful things. Can we figure out how to navigate the critique I feel from consuming news at all?
Well, okay, that's yes. So that is your version, Rick, of Susie's wanting to change you. You're not as interested in politics. If you were in charge of her, which thank goodness you're not, because you wouldn't even like her, right? If we got what we wanted in marriage, we wouldn't like that person. You married somebody who is interested in that stuff. She's always going to be interested in that stuff. For you, it's just accepting that.
Yeah.
And not giving her any zingers that she should be approaching these things differently, just as she would let go of zingers that you two shut down and you don't care enough. So it's accepting each other as you are, which is part of what these differences are, part of what we fall in love with people about, and then we just battle on.
Okay.
So in terms of time, you up for another try at a conversation?
Sure.
And do you want to do the Israeli?
Do you want to try that?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
So, and I'll help you, Coach, but let's go back to that conversation.
Okay.
Mindful of what we talked about here. And so, Susie, why don't you start?
All right. So I've been really sad watching what's going on in the news with Israel. And it just breaks my heart to see how everything has gotten escalated and out of control.
I'm sorry that you feel sad. It makes me sad too.
I feel like there's got to be ways for, instead of creating all these divisions, I wish there were, ways that that other voices in the Israeli the people could be, could have some, say in what's going on. I feel like there's, I don't know. I just feel I feel like just like the Palestinians are kind of being held hostage to Hamas. I feel like right now Israelis sometimes are, being held hostage to their government, and it's frustrating because I don't think it has to be this way. That makes me sad, and I don't like the rise of anti-Semitism that's going on in our country right now as a result of it, and it feels very uncomfortable.
I couldn't agree with you more on all of that, actually. I mean, I too am very bothered by the rise of anti-Semitism. I think I have a different point of view as to where that's coming from, because I think that you feel it's sourced by the government and Netanyahu, and I feel like there's people who hate Israel, period, don't want it to exist, and that they take advantage of these types of I feel that they take advantage of these situations and stir it up to get to a place where they always wanted to be, which is sort of hating on Jews. So it makes me really sad too.
Okay, so let's stop for a moment. Boy, that sure looked different. How did that feel?
Felt different.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, how did it feel different to you, Susie?
It was more about feelings as opposed to like having to, I didn't like having to like, I didn't feel defensive as much.
Mhm. Yeah. How did it feel to you, Rick?
Well, she, and you said not to read her mind, but I felt like she was really trying to stay away from the trigger points that normally sink this conversation before it even starts.
That's probably true.
So it made it really easy for me to engage, actually. So
That's a true
so,
statement.
yeah.
And maybe, I don't know. I mean, maybe is that the goal is not to create those triggers? I don't know.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, you did what in marital research they call a soft startup, Susie.
It was very
A
soft.
soft startup. If you come on, and I don't think you're dispositionally a gladiator, but if in those roles, if you sort of come on that way, can you believe what's happening over there?
Yeah.
Elevated voice. It invites opposition. It invites a bunch of other things. But Rick, so you did the self startup, and Rick, you responded. But I also want to encourage you, even if Susie slips and does her gladiator, you don't have to respond the same way. This is the thing: if you both are working on your changes, you don't say, "Well, you started that way, so I'll do my defender and I'll tell you you're naive," right? You can go soft. Okay. And what you did, you see, one of the things you did, Rick, was you looked for something to agree with.
Yes.
Okay. It's one of the kind of the great skills that if somebody says, even if they say 4 or 5 things, and also, Susie, you didn't overtalk your opener, right? You were briefer, but find something to agree with. Like, I'm really distressed about this rise of anti-Semitism. Of course, this is your family here. These are people you love. So you joined right there. So look for something you can agree with. And then I'm glad you also said, and I see this differently, and you said your own view. You were quite visible on that, your own view. And I imagined if you kept going, you would have seen where you agree and where you disagree. So really nice job, guys.
Well, thank you for coaching us through it.
Yeah. Hey, yeah. So you're mostly off the hook now. And the rest of this, okay? So take a breath. And so I'll invite Ron back on the screen to, hey, welcome back, Ron.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much, Bill and Susie and Rick. Man, great conversation. Boy, I'd like to invite the panelists to join with Bill at this time. And it is Martin Hunk, Barbara Farmer, Karen Lazarus, and the great Paul Norris. I would just, all right.
Okay, so those folks will come on the screen.
Yeah.
And Rick and Susie, you can just listen in now. Okay, you've done the heavy lifting. And so for just the audience here, this is a time called this reflecting team. These are folks who have been listening in and who are going to talk about what they learned, what some of their take homes were from listening to our conversation. And so they will be joining us here in a second. And Ron, I always love your sugar bear.
I can give you my smiley face.
So I guess we're having a little back scenes efforts to get folks on. So I don't see Susie and Rick at the moment.
They are visible.
Oh, okay. So how do I see the panel here and them, Randy?
So you can switch your view to gallery.
Okay, very good. Oh, there we go. I was on big screen and I just saw Ron, although I always like to see you, Ron. All right. So this is a time for our reflecting team to just share some things that you learned, that you took, that you appreciated. Um, and um, and how about Martin? If I could start with you, and then we'll hear from everybody, and then we'll just have a conversation. So, Martin, what did you learn or take away from what you observed?
Sure. Good evening. First of all, thank you so much, Susie and Rick. That was really interesting to watch, lovely to watch. And you two obviously have so much love for each other and so much support there. And it was great to see how we can still fall into these roles. This is one thing I took from this that I found very interesting, like how Bill said to you, Susie, that you are like a kind of a convincer, and Rick is a defender. And when I think about like what does a convincer do? You know, when do you want to convince somebody, and why, and what is behind that? And that reminds me of my own marriage, where I often speak to get something without saying what I want. And then I don't get it. I get something very different, and I'm unhappy with the results. So I'm wondering if you know, you fall into the role of the convincer. That is you. It's, you know, what you bring into the relationship. It's part of who you are. And you want to maybe convince somebody because I don't know you, so I can't really interpret this. But, you know, maybe there's some unaddressed need that you feel worried about something. You want to find closeness. And so you hope to get this by convincing someone, hey, this is something we need to talk about. And then, of course, if Rick doesn't agree with the views, you don't get the closeness that you were looking for, because in the end, you're talking about something different. And to develop that awareness, like, oh, I'm having a role, I'm trying to do something that I didn't really say directly. Like, I'm trying to do this with my wife before I engage in a conversation, especially if I'm emotional about anything, to become really clear. What is it actually that I hope to happen here? Mm-hmm. And have that presence before I start talking, because otherwise I know from experience it's not going to work the way I want to. So,
okay. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Karen, you want to go next? Something you learned?
First of all, what I want to say to Rick and Susie, like, wow, your transparency and your honesty was profound. I just want to say profound. I almost feel a little teary to have been in the presence of it. And then I, you know, it's so funny. I had a conversation with a friend this weekend that actually kind of mirrored yours. And so it was really good to see it being played out. I love seeing when you started listening to each other, like there became an interest in what each other had to say, that there was a softening on both of your parts and a willingness to listen. It seemed deeper is what I got when I watched you folks. So that is the major thing I took about your honesty, your transparency, and your willingness to shift and to listen to each other. Even if you may never agree about a topic, but you can at least be in the realm of, wow, we do have this in common. So thank you.
All right.
Okay. Barbara.
Yeah, I enjoyed may not be the right word, but I was riveted really by the conversation that you had. At the outset, even before the discussion about the topic on which you disagreed, I was really impressed by the insight each of you had into what your triggers were, what bothered you. And you owned, both of you owned those things. You know, as you proceeded with the conversation, before the little nudge from Bill, I mean, it sounded as if you were speaking with one another if nobody else was in the room. You didn't have like 500 people watching you. Well, you don't really have 500 people watching you, but you know, as Karen said, you were very transparent. And then the vulnerability after the little course corrections you made was really, really moving. It was, kind of felt like Karen a little bit, a little teary. And the last thing is, despite all the differences, the love you have for one another cannot be denied. I mean, the smile was on your faces even as you argued. And now I'm getting teary because that is just so important. So thank you.
So Paul,
Yeah.
Yeah, well, please let Ron know that the great Paul Norris couldn't make it today, but I'm here in his place. If that person even exists. Yeah, I just want to, I take my hat off to you for the courage that it takes to do this, to get up in front of a bunch of people. If in your imagination there are people, like therapists or nonviolent communication specialists who find this easy and just do it flawlessly without ever getting triggered, please introduce me to such, because I've never met them. This is hard for all of us, that little thing, the amygdala, when it gets triggered, the skills, kind of go out the window. And so, but it's beautiful. It was beautiful to see, what you guys were able to do here. From the bottom of my heart, I hope that that you find, that you can take this and, practice it, when it's just the two of you. Because again, I know how different that is. I noticed, there's a dimension that we don't talk about a whole lot, which is just how much do people actually want to talk about politics? And this is a difference too. I think it's one of the major places where blues and reds differ. Do they really want to, how much energy do we want to put into this stuff? Where do we want to put our energy in life? And so that's another place, to meet each other. And I guess I was just really struck and really touched because it seemed to me that in the second part, somehow in my view, you got to where you were talking about what you were really talking about. And so often people talk about stuff, it's not really what they're talking about. It's not really what's going on. And I felt like you moved to that. And the content that you talked about later on, the content shifted because you were having a very, very different kind of conversation. It didn't get stuck like this, but it felt like it moved to places of rapprochement. So good for you guys. Good for you. In my next conversation with my wife, I aspire to do as well as you did.
Well, Bill's going to have to move in with us. So,
no, actually,
so welcome to Colorado.
Yes, actually, yeah, it's nicer there than Minnesota a lot of the year. So, it actually so I'll offer reflection too to follow up on what Paul was saying. When you return to your conversation with each other, I was prepared to coach you if necessary, because I was determined you were not going to fail. Okay, not after all this. But I didn't have to say a word, and I, like Karen and Barbara, I was getting a little teary myself. It was tender. You were tender, and I wasn't coaching you to be tender. I was just trying to help you, kind of pull back and not try to antagonize each other as much. Not that you tried to, but not antagonize each other. And what struck me is when you did that, when you maintained some kind of that respect for each other, then the tenderness came out. It just sort of popped out. It didn't. And if you had to be coached on that, it wouldn't have felt right anyway. But that's just what seemed to happen. So, Rick and Suzanne, invite you to share any reflections you have for what you heard here from this team, and anything else that you're thinking about this experience.
I feel really lucky that we got to have this experience. I know that it definitely has made me shift and realize the intentions of having these conversations, that I don't have to, it's futile to try to change anyone, change his opinion. And it's not going to get my needs met as to wanting to be heard and approaching it that way. And you're correct in that when that intention changes, then you're right, that tenderness of wanting to be heard and understood is kind of what led the conversation the second time. And I think it made all the difference.
Ron, I think that was your and so Rick, what's your take?
Yeah, so I would guess I'd have a similar point of view, in the sense of, I know she wants to have these conversations. And so, and as everyone who's married knows, that being married is understanding the needs of your spouse and being able to deliver on them at least some of the time. And so, what I'm excited about is these techniques that you teach, I think, are putting me in a position where I'll be way more willing to go out there and have the conversation, on my terms, but in ways that I think will really meet her needs. And so I know her. She's, if I meet her a little way, she's going to meet me, there. And so the whole thing is sort of can become a very virtuous cycle of positive, reinforcement. So.
And I can't believe how quickly, like how tangible the things that you shared for us to, for me to reflect on and to embrace make such a quick difference. Like I didn't think it would be, I don't know.
That you had a lot of workshops to go.
Yeah.
Well, so let me add a realistic note that you demonstrated your ability, both of you, to take in some understanding of the pattern you're in, each of your parts, and then to do a shift. It takes practice.
Right.
And then because there are times when one or the other of you is in a bad mood, not your best self, and you'll slip back. We all do. What I'm hoping though is that when you process it later, and like I just felt like the old days. Who was Bill anyway? What was his? That was completely unrealistic. That when you process it later, you'll think, maybe I was doing some of my maybe I was being the convincer, maybe I was being the defender, maybe I wasn't listening for the soft feelings, maybe I didn't look for something to agree with. So that was on me. Now I may think my spouse had plenty of guilt on this, but hey, that's on me. And then I can try to correct it. I can try to do something different.
Right.
And
and just having this awareness that you've given us is huge.
Well, I don't feel like, well, okay, I'll take that. I sort of activated something you already knew. And that's what I was hearing from our reflectors here, that there's some wisdom that you guys already have that I helped you touch. That's what that was. If you didn't already know what it's like to back up and respect somebody and to go stuff, if you didn't know that, there's no way you could have done it. I was just trying to help you activate it.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. So Ron,
Yes.
welcome back, my friend.
Well, I've been here the whole time and had a little guest that comes in the room, but that's okay. First of all, I'd like to thank Rick and Susie for participating in this. This is such a marvelous thing. And also the panel, Barb, Martin, Karen, and Paul. I don't want to forget Paul. And of course, Dr. Bill. Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to let the audience know that in the Braver Angels way, in the chat, to make sure that you fill out the survey. Now, I should, if I'm not mistaken, it should be maybe a QR code, or you could just copy the link and then fill it out. There it is. It's right on the screen. And so take your phone if you would like it says, and take a picture of it, and then fill out the survey at your leisure. Now, as you are filling out the survey, I'd like to give you Ron McFarland's final message. And I start that message with, how can we use this for our relationship in the country? And I say, it's amazing how much we can get done together when you don't worry about changing a mind or getting credit for it or who wins. The most important thing, as the audience just saw, work the problem with one heartbeat, especially with a little vulnerability thrown in there, sprinkled, just like my nickname, Sugar Bear. Build a united house. That is what the Braver Angels way is all about. And with that, I'll say I'll see you in the future. About the Family Divide series will be coming your way in the future. Thank you very much.
And we're going to give folks just a quick minute to make sure that everyone has a chance to get to that evaluation and start it, because it is very important that we have that information, and we will end the webinar right after that.
And can we just everyone out there and those of us in the panel, Braver Angels, applause and thank you for Rick and Susie for what they did here. This was, what a gift to all of us, guys. What a gift.
All right, thanks everyone.